Thanks for joining us to hear about social justice, democracy, and globalization in higher education today. I'm Dr. Fiona Glade, Dean of Communication Studies, English Language for Academic Purposes, and Linguistics here at Montgomery College. As the curator for the Athenaeum series, I'm honored to welcome you, and with deep respect, let's gratefully acknowledge the native peoples on whose ancestral homelands Montgomery College sits, as well as the diverse and vibrant Native communities who make their home today in Montgomery County. As the Athenaeum recognizes Mental Health Awareness Month, our events this year are all exploring the timely theme of social justice and community wellness. I have to say, it's really good to be back in person. Thank you for coming. You can find more information about our program and view recordings of previous speakers on our MC Athenaeum website. And this event is being recorded and will be available on the website soon. As you know, this morning's presentation is part of the Frank Islam Athenaeum Speaker Series, which is made possible through a gift from Mr. Islam and his wife, Debbie Driesman. And Mr. Islam also happens to be serving as moderator for our very illustrious panel this morning. I'm also delighted to welcome our three panelists, Dr. Tia McNair, Dr. Raj Kumar, and Dr. Brit Kirwan. I also want to welcome the chair of Montgomery College's Board of Trustees, Dr. Michael Brintnell, and MC Senior Vice President, Dr. Sanjay Rai. I'm also happy to see that we have Professor Miller's Art 100 class here with us this morning. Thanks to you all for coming. Before we go on, I want to recognize the work of a few outstanding colleagues who make this event happen every time. Our TV producer, Mr. Peter Pereira, Miss Vivian Chang, who coordinates the admin, and our two amazing Athenaeum faculty fellows, Professor Katima Lee from English and Professor Amanda Miller from Art. At the close of the panel discussion, Professors Miller and Lee will facilitate a Q&A with the audience, so please get your questions ready. And now, I'll happily pass the mic to Montgomery College President Jermaine Williams, who's recorded a special message for us.
Welcome to Germantown campus and to the second Athenaeum event of the year. As you know, the Frank Islam Athenaeum series theme this fall is social justice, community wellness. I'm thrilled that our outstanding panel will focus on higher education in terms of social justice, democracy, and globalization. Central to this theme is the importance of community. This series brings people together from the college and the community to engage around topics that resonate with students, but also inspire Montgomery County residents. I hope you are all eager to hear from the panelists today about what diversity teaches us. One important component of inclusion is the soon-to-be open Center for Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation in the East County. We're excited about the work there and very pleased to have support from the American Association of Colleges and Universities in those efforts. This series wouldn't be possible without our donors, Frank Islam and his wife, Debbie Driesman. I want to express the college's gratitude for their generosity in supporting this series. The vision of the series captures Mr. Islam's indelible commitment to civic, educational, and artistic causes. I know that he channels that same spirit into his community work with the U.S. Institute of Peace, the Woodrow Wilson Center, and the Brookings Institution, among other institutions. We are very fortunate that his interests in higher education include the college, in addition to several other venerable institutions. I hope you enjoy the event and that it sparks even more questions and perhaps activism among you.
Good morning. Thank you, Fiona. Let's give our Dean, Fiona Glade, another round of applause for wonderful work that she does in organizing the Frank Islam Athenaeum series and her tremendous work during the pandemic when the series continued in a virtual environment, attended by hundreds of our students and college community and external community as well. We really appreciate everything that you do. I have an enormous task of introducing our panelists who have demonstrated significant accomplishments in education and other fields over the years. So I'm going to be very brief, but still, let's give an attempt. Certainly, starting with Mr. Frank Islam, our generous donor and good friend of Montgomery College. I will never forget the day about 10 years ago when I invited him for a lunch and made a small ask about this idea of Athenaeum lecture series. I can tell you that it took a fraction of seconds when he said, yes, Sanjay, let's do that. So Mr. Islam, thank you very much. Mr. Islam is a successful entrepreneur, philanthropist, and Frank has led successfully business since 1994, starting with just few employees and growing his company QSS to several hundred employees, and eventually selling it to Ross Perot, I would say for $300 million or more. And more importantly, using those resources for betterment of humanity, social justice, and education throughout the world, including Montgomery College. In addition, he writes several popular blogs in Huffington Post, The Medium. Frank has authored 2 books, Working the Pivot Points to Make America Work Again in 2013, and Renewing the American Dream, A Citizen's Guide to Restoring Our Competitive Advantage in 2010. Frank has demonstrated a special commitment to civic, educational, and artistic courses. He serves on a number of boards and advisory councils, not only in civic life, but also in higher education. This includes the Kennedy Center Board of Trustees, the Woodrow Wilson Center, the Strathmore, the Brookings Institution, as well as Johns Hopkins University. His lifelong contribution as an entrepreneur and civic leader, Frank Islam has worked, in his own words, to create opportunities that are sustainable and uplifting for humanity, guided by the virtues of hard work, focus, quality, innovation, and kindness. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Islam. Now, Dr. Brit Kirwan, a fellow mathematician, I was just having a word with him. Many years ago, I made a career change from university system to community colleges, and I was thinking about, is it a good idea? Do mathematicians go in higher education leadership? I was coming from Florida. I did a Google search. I found that Judy Ackerman, who hired me, was a mathematician. Then I came across Freeman Rabowski in Maryland, who was a mathematician. Then I saw Chancellor, who was a mathematician. I thought something is right in Maryland. Let's go. Chancellor Emeritus of the University System of Maryland, Dr. Kirwan served 13 years as Chancellor of the University System of Maryland, following his presidency from the great Ohio State University. And before that, presidency of the University of Maryland College Park for 10 years, after being University of Maryland faculty in mathematics for 24 years. A mathematician, Dr. Kirwan has chaired the American Council of Higher Education, the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities, and American Association of Colleges and Universities, the Business Higher Education Forum, and the National Research Council Board of Higher Education and Workforce. In 2016, Dr. Kirwan was appointed by Maryland Governor Hogan to chair the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education, resulting in the blueprint for Maryland's future, a set of recommendations for legislative and policy initiatives to increase the availability of innovative educational opportunities and to make adequate and equitable the funding for the state public education. I want to tell you, Chancellor, that Montgomery College is very much involved in the implementation of the blueprint report, especially on the teacher education side, especially within that early childhood education. We have received, through your work, through these recommendations, we have recently received a $1.4 million for an alternative certification program. So thank you for your leadership in that space. Now, a very special guest, my dear friend, Dr. Raj Kumar, Vice Chancellor of OP Jindal Global University. Dr. Raj Kumar is the founding Vice Chancellor of OP Jindal Global University, an institution of eminence and deemed to be a university in India, which was established just in 2009 and is one of the only 20 universities in India and the only listen to this carefully, my colleagues, the only non-STEM university which has been declared as an institution of eminence by the government of India. A multidisciplinary and research-oriented university with 9 different schools related to law, business, international affairs, public policy, liberal arts and humanities, journalism and communication, art and architecture, banking, finance, environment, and sustainability. JGU has acquired a stellar reputation in India and abroad for its effort to promote excellence in teaching, research, capacity building, and community service. Jindal Global University is ranked among the top 800 universities in the world in the QS World University Ranking 2020. The Jindal Global Law School has been ranked among the top 150 law schools in the world in the QS World University Ranking 2020 Law and is ranked the number 1 law school in India. A Rhodes Scholar, Dr. Kumar has academic qualifications from the University of Oxford, Harvard University, University of Hong Kong, University of Delhi, and Loyola College in Chennai, India. And he has worked in the fields of human rights and development, comparative constitutional law, terrorism and national security, corruption and governance, law and disaster management, legal education, and higher education. He has numerous publications in peer reviewed journals around the world and is author or co author of 7 books, including The Future of Indian University, The Education Precedent, The Institution Building for Nation Building, and The Corruption and Human Rights in India Comparative Perspectives on Transparency and Good Governance. Very pleased to have Dr. Kumar with us today. A number of at least 100 faculty, staff, and community members from Montgomery County has visited Jindal Global University, and he has provided great hospitality to our guests there. Thank you very much. Dr. Tia Brown McNair, Vice President in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Student Success at American Association of Colleges and Universities. AACC and U's mission is to advance the democratic purposes of higher education by promoting equity, innovation, and excellence in liberal education. AAC&U was founded in 1915 and now boasts memberships of degree-granting higher education institutions across the United States and more than 25 countries, soon to be, I guess, in India as well. Dr. Kumar is here. Thank you. Uh, As Vice President in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Student Success, Dr. McNair oversees programs on equity, inclusive excellence, high impact practices, and student success. And she directs AAC and U's Summer Institute on higher impact practices and student success. Author of several books, but I'm going to mention one which Montgomery College leadership team is reading, and that is From Equity Talk to Equity Walk. Thank you and welcome to Montgomery College.
So we are deeply grateful to these three panelists, Dr. Kirwan, who I have known for many, many years, and his distinguished service to our nation, Dr. Kumar, who is the Vice Chancellor of the Global Jindal University that I visited, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, or maybe more. I do not remember exactly, but it's a fantastic university. He's a fantastic guy, and Dr. McNair, thank you for being here. Let's start the conversation, and Sanjay, you did a good job, so fantastic. So what I want to do is start the question for each panelist. I will start, Dr. Kumar, with you. Please tell us where your passion and commitment for advancing social justice through higher education comes from. What is the definition of social justice? What impact does it have, and why we should have that?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank Montgomery College as well as its president and my dear friend Sanjay Rai, and of course Mr. Islam for instituting this lecture series here. It's a pleasure to be here. I've had the privilege to be associated with Montgomery College for many years, and every time I come, I'm deeply inspired by its expansion, its vision, its commitment to excellence. In fact, one of the remarkable things about being here in this context is, and as a real life experience, I can say that how education can be a transformative impact in one's life and one's journey. There are two examples here from people from the Indian subcontinent, both Mr. Islam and as well as Sanjay Rai, and they joined another extraordinary group of Indian Americans, including Sundar Pichai of Google and Satya Nadella of Microsoft, and many others for whom the journey from India and the Indian subcontinent to the United States and how education has played a very significant role. So I want to start by paying tribute to both of you for your leadership and the impact that you've had in this university and beyond. Personally speaking, Frank, I think the vision of social justice is the raison d'etre of education. In fact, for all of us who are in the field of education, the most important motivation that helps us to remain in the field of education is the significant impact that it can have on not just one, but multiple generations. The theme of social justice is sometimes seen from the lens of public policy, from law, and from governance. But if I were to look at education itself, the kind of impact that education has on individual and the community has a long-lasting impact on the society itself. That's why the relationship between education and social justice is important. I also want to mention that for a very long time, education was the privilege of the few. Even today, we face the challenge. Even the world's best institutions pride in the fact that their entire admissions policy is based upon what would arguably be seen as an exclusionary model in which a large number of people are simply kept outside the possibility to be educated. The venerable institutions such as Montgomery College have challenged that status quo and have created a more democratic, inclusive opportunity for a large number of students to pursue high quality education. And that theme of social justice, I believe, should define all aspects of education.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. Dr. Kirwan?
Yes.
Same question to you. What impact does it have? Why is it important? What are the key ingredients of successes for social justice?
Yeah. Well, for me, the definition of social justice is relatively simple. It is that society should create equal opportunity for everyone in our society, make it possible for each individual, no matter their zip code, no matter their race, ethnicity, gender, to realize their dreams, hopes and dreams.
Yeah, right.
And we're not there as a country.
Yes.
But that's the goal we have to move toward. Now, how did I become so passionate about this issue? And it really started in my youth, because I was born in Lexington, Kentucky.
Wow.
which was a segregated community. I went
Yes.
to segregated schools until I was a senior in high school when Brown versus Board of Education was passed. However, I had very enlightened parents and very progressive, socially aware parents who made me aware from my earliest years of the terrible impact of discrimination and exclusion in our society. And they would take me to different parts of Lexington and see how there was no social justice.
Right.
And this got instilled in me from my earliest years. And then I've, of course, devoted my entire life to education. From the day I went to kindergarten, I've never left education. And throughout my career, both as a faculty member and as administrator, I've done what I can to move whatever institutions I was associated with and leading towards the ideal of true social justice.
Well, before I ask the question, Dr. McNair, who I admire so much, my story can only happen in America. It's America's inclusiveness and openness that provided me the letters of opportunity to succeed. These are the strengths, values, and qualities of America all of us can proudly and truly embrace. I crossed the Atlantic Ocean when I was at 12 years of age to attain and achieve the American dream. Dr. McNair, your question.
Sure.
Same question to you.
Yeah, so good morning, everyone, and thank you again for having me. I'm honored and humbled to be on this distinguished panel. So I'm going to talk about this from a personal responsibility and then a social responsibility aspect. So the personal piece is, why am I motivated to do this work? I'm a mother of a Black son, a 15-year-old son. So for me, from a personal perspective, I am trying in my small sphere of influence within the world to think about him and others like him and what this means for his future and his growth. From another piece of social responsibility, I believe in higher education. I believe in the power of it to be focused on social justice. And in our work, as we've talked about, thank you for reading the book, we define equity in the social justice piece as corrective justice. I want to be honest, and let's be truthful, let's have this truthful conversation on this, is that the higher education system, especially in the United States, was never designed for people like me. Let's just be honest with that. It was never designed for people who look like me. And I understand that we have to be examples in higher education of the policies and the structures and the procedures that are actually going to fulfill the goal of corrective justice and social justice and equity in the same way that we are trying to teach our students to go out in the community and do that. So that's one of the reasons why I believe that we launched the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation effort in partnership with the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. You heard President Williams talk about that. I am so honored to be working with the team here at Montgomery College as we launch this, and Dr. Irene Moshes for her leadership that is going to, yes, thank you, I'm waving at her right now. I want to give her a shout out for the work that she's doing in really helping us think, what would our communities look, feel, and be like when there's no longer a false belief in a hierarchy of human value. That is our common goal for the work of TRHT. It's the common goal for what I feel is our social responsibility, is to dismantling hierarchy and privilege so that we can have, as you mentioned, Brit, all of these equal opportunities. But the reality is, and let's be truthful, we haven't reached that yet.
No.
And our systems and our structures, we haven't reached that yet within higher education. That's why we have inequities in student outcomes.
Thank you, Dr. McNair. And so I will go to Dr. Kumar, ask him a personal question. You have stated the universities have been entrusted with having a moral imperative to engage and contribute to the local, national, and global communities. And at the same time, universities, including students and faculty, must serve as a role model for equity, diversity, inclusion, and justice. And these attributes should be at the heart of their teaching, research, and governance. Can you please tell us some of what your university has done and why is it a role model? And what kind of things have you achieved? Do you have any success story to share with us?
Thank you very much, Frank. In fact, I have always maintained that universities are very unique institutions. You cannot compare them to corporations, companies, business enterprises, non-governmental organizations, think tanks, research institutions, or pretty much anything else in society. They are sui generis institutions which might have characteristics of all the other things. So in that context, universities have this extraordinary role and responsibility to educate and inspire and transform the next generation while also creating new ideas and challenging existing ideas and even challenging status quo. And that's a huge responsibility that universities have. Now, of course, we are a very relatively young university. We were created in the year 2009 through a philanthropic initiative of our founding chancellor and benefactor, Mr. Naveen Jindal. But this university was born out of a huge inspiration that I had personally living and studying and working in this country. I had, earlier I was a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, but later I came to Harvard. And at Harvard Law School, I saw the possibility of how universities can be transformative. The intellectually vibrant environment, the strong and deeper commitment towards diversity and pluralism in terms of ideas and people, but also the ability of research and knowledge creation and publications, how it can fundamentally reimagine the existing social and legal structures of our society. That inspiration led me to spend the next several years working as a lawyer in New York, teaching in Japan, and then teaching in Hong Kong, and got to meet with this benefactor and persuading him to do three things. One, to make a substantial financial commitment. Second, to do it in a not-for-profit manner. And third, to let me have the academic freedom and autonomy and independence to build a world-class university. But from the very beginning, it was so critical for us to build a private university that is deeply embedded in public service. In fact, the motto and the mission of our university is a private university promoting public service. This idea of public service was so deeply embedded in the vision of the university that from the very beginning, we invested significantly in resources that will provide access to education for a large number of people. The reality is, a country like India, which has 1.4 billion people, 900 million people are less than 35 years of age. These young people, I believe, will not only shape the future of India, but will be shaping the future of the world. This demographic dividend that India has can only be achieved if we are able to invest in education. Otherwise, it will end up becoming a demographic disaster. And that's why it's important for us to educate these young people. We provided access, and I'm happy to report that over 50% of our students are studying with some form of scholarship or the other, which essentially means that there are even first-generation learners who simply may not have an opportunity to pursue education. Second, we were also deeply committed to the fact that high-quality institutions need to bridge the gap between theory and practice, teaching and research. These are not unidimensional objectives that universities need to pursue. We need to invest on both, and we ended up having a faculty-student ratio of 1:9, which has enabled our faculty members to pursue teaching while pursuing research, both of which has had a significant impact on the intellectual ecosystem within the university. And the last thing I would say is that as we have traveled in this journey of 13 years, the vision of social justice was something that we did through scholarship and we continue to do. The vision of globalization was so critical for us. We recognized from the very beginning that we are part of a wider intellectual community, not just confined to India, but the whole world. And so we brought faculty members from around the world. So the 1,000 faculty members that we have, the full time, they come from 47 countries in the world, and they're living and working on our campus. The students, the 10,000 plus students that we have, they are from over 50 countries in the world, and they also contribute to that intellectual diversity and pluralism that's deeply embedded. So in conclusion, I want to say that the university's vision has been able to advance to the social justice mission, the public service objective, the community engagement, and the internationalization.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. I'll direct my next question to Dr. McNair. The primary conclusion of the Global Forum on Higher Education Leadership for Democracy, Sustainability, and Social Justice, held at Dublin City, was that without higher education's commitment and leadership, we would not have a real democracy. In your opinion, what are the most critical areas in which higher education must demonstrate leadership to advance the cause of democracy?
Again, being honest with this particular question, I do believe in what you said, Roger, and the conversation about what higher education's role is to promote the community engagement, to help students develop as critical thinkers, problem solvers, to advance this particular preparation for success in our community and in our world. But at the same time, I think here in the United States, one of the things that we are struggling with is, in some instances, we equate democracy with equity. And that's not true. There are many of our younger students and our communities are struggling with the belief in our democracy, the belief that the people who are representing us in our democratic ideals are representative of who they are. And if you were interested in looking at this data, go to the group Next 100. They're a group of young scholars and practitioners that are gathering research about how our young community and the people who we're talking about here that are pursuing higher education, what they're feeling about our democracy. So we have a little bit of a disconnect. We in higher education, we want to educate for democracy. We want to prepare our students to be part of our community and help solve some of these critical and challenging problems that we're having. But at the same time, we have to realize that what our ideal is not translating into practice for many of our students and many people in our community, especially those who have been disenfranchised. So I believe that our role in advancing the cause of democracy is to engage in those truthful conversations, to engage in deep listening, to really think about what we need to do to restore faith and into our systems. I think that is increasingly important. I think that it's also responsible for us to look at, just like we talk in TRHT, of hierarchy and privilege within separation, law, and the economy, within those pillars, and looking at what is it that we need to do in order to get to this equality of opportunity for all of our students. So we have a lot of interrogation, a lot of let's lift up what it is that we need to do in educating for democracy, but we have a lot of research, a lot of data, a lot of reality checks that we need to do in order to support these ideals.
Thank you, Dr. McNair. Now, my next question, Director Dr. Kirwan. One of the key findings in the 2016 report of higher education in President Obama's administration was the gap in the access and affordability and in opportunity to complete a degree have contributed to the diminished social mobility across generation in the United States, particularly for people who are socially and economically disadvantaged and people of color. What are some of the primary things that higher education has done and should do to expand the pipeline for the people who are left behind, who are underprivileged, who are socially economically disadvantaged, who are people of color?
Yeah. This is such a fundamentally important question and issue. And the short answer is higher education hasn't done enough.
Yeah.
It needs to do, I'm not talking about Montgomery College, which is an open access institution. And I feel so proud to be a citizen in Montgomery County with an institution that serves this county as well as Montgomery College does. But as I look back over my life, the dynamic that we're faced with now versus in my youth. In my youth, whether you had a college degree or not didn't matter all that much in terms of your ability to have a good life, to live a middle-class life, to provide for your children. But over the decades, our economy has changed in such a way that it now places incredible premium on people with skills and knowledge and education. And so having a college degree has become, in a way, a dividing line for those with opportunity and those who have greatly diminished opportunity. And so the importance of having a college degree or the skills necessary to get a high-skilled job have become absolutely paramount. So at this very time when higher education is now seen as such an essential path for a successful life and career, it has become less and less accessible because of cost. Now, why is that? Why is it that the cost has driven up? In large part, it's because of the decline in public investment in higher education. And as the public has invested less in higher education, the cost has risen because tuitions have risen to fill that gap. And this is a tragic thing because in our society, and it's creating the kinds of division that are making, are at the root of this dysfunction and dissatisfaction and disruption that we are experiencing in our society now. The discontent is really between, in many ways, those that have had a chance for education versus those that haven't. And we've got to decrease this, we've got to find a bridge so that more and more people have an opportunity to benefit from education. Now, what can our universities do? Well, I think one of the failings of many of our universities is that we have pursued this superficial ranking of our colleges and universities, which means we get measured by how good we are, by how many students we turn away, by how selective we are, using sort of very superficial measures of the ability of students to be successful at college. And universities pound their chest by how low their admission rate is at their institution. And that is so counterproductive to what our society needs now. We need universities to take a much broader view and get back to their core mission of being more responsible for the common good, and to make access and inclusion a much higher priority, like, quite frankly, Montgomery College does. So I am very pleased that my university, University of Maryland College Park, which has to do more, is not where it ought to be, but has created a very well-funded $100 million endowed scholarship that is entirely need-based. College Park is on a path to becoming a needs-blind institution. That is, providing if you're admissible to the university, there will be the resources available to enable you to get a degree. We need more and more colleges across our university to invest more of their resource, not in pure so-called merit scholarships, but in need-based scholarships, and allow those that have the capacity to be successful at the university to have a chance to do so. I think another thing that we all as citizens need to do is get our federal government to invest more in need-based financial aid. Now, there have been some increases in the Pell Grant, our centerpiece financial aid. 20 or 30 years ago, it paid 80 or 90% of the cost of attending college. Now it pays a third or less.
Right.
So we need a much greater support from the federal government through need-based financial aid and work study programs. So this is a moment of real crisis in our society, and I think we all have to speak up. we have to put much more expectation on our colleges and universities to be more inclusive, to find ways to provide the financial support for high ability students who have financial need so that they can benefit from
How do
education.
you get the public-private partnership in terms of getting the philanthropist, like the foundation, like the Gates Foundation, and some
Right.
other, to be engaged and involved with the university, so the university can get the scholarship they need to give it to the people, to the students, so that they can be, so
Well,
they can work there.
I'll give one example of
Yeah.
how this happened. The University of Maryland has a phenomenal donor by the name of A.
Robert.
James Clark,
Right.
who started the Clark Construction Company,
yes, I
and
do
one
know.
of the great construction companies
Yes,
in America.
and the
America.
foundation.
He was a student at the
Yeah.
University of Maryland, College Park. His family was very poor. He had a scholarship, so he had tuition covered. But he had to live at home. He couldn't afford to live on the campus. And he was so poor that many days he didn't have money for the bus fare. So he had to hitchhike to come to the university to get his education.
And that was big, when, 1930s?
This was in the 1940s.
40s.
Okay. So this man gets a degree from the university and goes on and becomes unbelievably wealthy.
Yes.
Hundreds of millions of dollars. And so when he passed away, he put in his will an enormous gift to the University of Maryland. And it was a significant part of it, $100 million, was a matching gift for need-based financial aid. So that if you were admitted to the university and you needed aid, you could get supported from this grant. That's the kind of philanthropy
Right.
we need in this country. Philanthropy tied to financial, need-based financial aid.
That's very
Not tied to some superficial measure of merit.
I can also
Need-based
add
financial aid.
another person who has been very instrumental. It was Robert H. Smith.
Oh, Robert Smith, absolutely. Another great alum.
Another
of the
great,
university.
yeah, he
Yes.
was alumni. He passed away.
Yes,
Just
yes.
like Clark passed away. Let me ask you, I do not know what our timing is to each panelist, but I will start with Dr. Kumar. Nelson Mandela said education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And my own personal reactions of education and my definition of education empowers the mind, uplifts the soul, is the key ingredient of a success. So how we can increase teaching and learning global partnership and use those partnerships to support democratic learning outcomes.
Thank you, Frank. And with your permission, Frank, before I answer that question, I want to quickly react to Brett's point. One of the big challenges, Brett, with regard to, trying to balance between access to education for people on the one hand and the university's mission to promote excellence on the other is that if we position these two things one against the other, we run the risk of institutionalizing mediocrity in university systems. So we need to be conscious of the fact that it's not that somehow access has to be positioned against merit. We really need to focus on what you mentioned later on, which is about the fact that we need to have a larger pool of institutions which are able to promote that vision of excellence. We need to create access through scholarships, fellowships, financial aid, through both public and private contributions. We need to create incentives for philanthropists and other donors to make contributions into universities, because if we don't recognize the value of merit or excellence in whatever measure that institutions have, then the historical evolution of the great institute of learning that this country is proud of, which many other countries, including India, is seeking a lot of inspiration from, we run that risk of, in many ways, compromising on quality. So with that caveat, I would like us to think in terms of how we provide access and also commit ourselves to merit.
Frank, your point is well taken. The point I am making is that we have too many kids of merit
Who deserve.
who are fully capable of promoting the excellence of the institution, who can't attend.
Yes.
Because it's not affordable anymore.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the
those are
philanthropy.
the students we have to reach.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
And that's the way the philanthropy bit helps. But it's also important that we need more institutions, because the reality is, what we also don't want a situation is, many a time charitable endeavors are seen to be mediocre endeavors. We don't want that as well. We want to have world-class institutions. For example, I mean, again, we are sitting here in one such institution. The larger imagination of many colleges which are more in the community college context is they are not seen to be institutes of excellence. But here you have a Montgomery College which caters to the vision of excellence on the one hand and equally fulfills the vision of accessibility.
But I
And
think
that's
that what Dr. Kirwan is making the point, how do we get the foundation, like Gates Foundation is a good example, or the Clark Foundation, or the Robert H. Smith Foundation in Maryland, get them involved and engaged with the public-private partnership to make sure that we can make access to education affordable and accessible.
Absolutely. And I'm totally in favor of it. In fact, at least US has provided global leadership on private philanthropy.
Yes,
there is no country in the world, having studied in the UK and looked at education systems across Europe and Canada and Australia and New Zealand and other parts of the world. In fact, the contemporary evolution of philanthropic models in Asia, including Dika Singh and Ranjan Shah, and in our own country in India, people like the Tatas, and of course, more recently, Jindals and others, they have sought a lot of inspiration from the leading American philanthropic model institutions, and I support it. To answer your question, sorry that we took more time for that, is the idea of global partnerships is so critical. In fact, increasingly, we are living in times when the big problems of our time cannot be dealt with by a single country, or for that matter, a single institution. We need to forge substantive international partnerships that will bring together collective consciousness among educators as well as researchers, so that we can together address the big issues of our time, be it on issues surrounding climate change or migration, or the advances in science and technology with artificial intelligence and robotics and machine learning coming into our own lives. The big questions that we need to ask is, to what extent privacy matters? To what extent ethics matter? These issues that we are talking about require substantive global partnerships among universities from the West and the East, from the North and the South. Of course, speaking about Nelson Mandela's quote itself, he was absolutely right when he talked about education as an empowering aspect, how it can dramatically transform one generation to other generation. But equally, it was important. And another thing which he mentioned, which sometimes we forget, is that when Nelson Mandela came out of the Robben Island prison after over 2 decades of he being kept in captivity, he said that if I don't leave my anger and resentment inside that prison, I will always be a prisoner even when I come out. And that's where the birth of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and also the ideas of forgiveness on the one hand and personal transformation on the other grew. We need to have enlightened education which can seek that fundamental transformation among young people who can provide leadership for the future.
Dr. Kumar, thank you very much. We're running out of time. Dr. McNair and Dr. Kirwan, I will have a final thing to say for you guys for 2 minutes before we close the conversation.
Yeah.
Do you have anything?
Yeah, so just
to share with us?
to jump into this conversation right here, completely agree with the conversation about access and how important that is, and the quality piece, that we need to make sure that all of our students have access to a high quality education. But one of the things that I am very much concerned about when we're talking about teaching and learning with global partnership is making sure that our students who have been historically disenfranchised and marginalized within higher education have an opportunity to participate in those global partnerships. And we're thinking holistically, not just from the funding piece of this, but from the piece of what are we teaching them about globalization and their responsibilities when they may not have access to some of these opportunities, and how do we leverage technology within these confines of within higher education to open up those doors of opportunities to more students. And so that's my piece here. But I just really want to, in closing, as we begin to the Q&A piece of this, is that our work and the work that I am deeply committed to is focused on equity within higher education as it's tied to social justice and what does that mean for educating for democracy, and being very realistic about what, and aspirational at the same time, about what our current experiences are within our communities that surround our institutions, that our institutions are part of, and what we need to do to change internally and externally to actually achieve the goals that we're seeking.
Thank you, Dr. McNair. Dr. Kirwan?
Well, I'm going to step out of higher education for just a second, if I may.
Take your time.
Because, one of the challenges in our country in having equitable opportunities for higher education is the state of our pre-K through 12 education.
Yeah, that's very well said. Yes.
Which, unfortunately, it isn't equitably distributed in terms of quality. And so what happens is we have these cycles of poverty that never get eliminated because the people living in poverty don't have the quality of early childhood or pre-K through 12 education to enable them to get to college and then succeed and have better opportunities in life. But Maryland has a chance to change that because of the blueprint. The blueprint, for those of you who don't know it, is an incredible 10-year transformation of pre-K through 12 education based on best practices from the best performing systems around the world. And at its core is equity of opportunity in pre-K through 12 across the state. The commission I chaired learned a very sad fact. Maryland, we think of Maryland as a progressive state, but when it comes to funding pre-K through 12 education, we've become a very regressive state. We're the 15th most regressive state in the nation. But the blueprint is changing that with substantial amounts of funding going into schools where kids need the support the most. And so what we have, if we stick to this blueprint, 10 years, if we hold firm on this blueprint, we're going to become the model in the country for quality of pre-K through 12 education. And that is the way we can take a huge step to addressing social justice and equity of opportunity to participate in higher education.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. Kumar. Thank you, Dr. Kirwan. Thank you, Dr. McNair.
I know you agree that our moderator and panelists for the discussion were inspiring, and I personally really appreciate your brilliant leadership, all of you. So thank you for that work. And we'll turn now to our Athenaeum faculty fellows, Professor Lee and Professor Miller, who will facilitate Q&A. So if you would please approach a mic so that all of us can hear your question. A question for Mr. Islam or for any of our panelists.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Vincent Briley. I'm a part-time faculty here with the Achieving the Promise Academy. One of the questions I would like to add, at least ask, this is about globalization. I, along with a few of you here, have had a chance to visit institutions abroad and see how students are going through those motions. Again, when Dr. Kirwan was president of Ohio State, we had a lot of students studying abroad, taking what they learned from Ohio State University and going to other places like South Africa, Germany, et cetera, et cetera. How do we take that same model now, after COVID, to have more students who look like me, faculty who look like me, engage in universities such as Jindal University, engage in universities such as University of South Africa? If you could address that question, please.
Dr.
Kumar. Thank you so much for that question. I think you hit it on the nail. One of the most difficult aspects of higher education so far has been its inability to be innovative and imaginative when it comes to promoting the kind of mobility-based internationalization. And quite unfortunately, the mobility-based internationalization is one which requires resources. Now, during the pandemic, we have been very creative about having internationalization through, people sitting in Zoom-based and other platforms in other campuses and other classrooms. But the reality is, if we really want to engage with international communities, we need to create resources and opportunities for students to have those immersion experiences in other societies so that they can embrace and appreciate diversity. Because frankly, diversity and pluralism are not just theoretical concepts, they are lived experiences. And for one to have lived experiences, one needs to be in those societies and be immersed in those. So we need to create resources. Now, one of the things that we as a university have done is that whenever we approach internationalization, both for our students and students from abroad, students, not executive education, other things, we work on a zero overhead policy. So we ensure that all our internationalization efforts are based upon a zero institutional overhead model so that we can create more and more access for students to experience international education.
I want to ask a question to you, what he said. The people who look like me, that's what he said. How would you address that question, his question?
Well,
Be active participant in education, not only in this country, but around the globe. And that's the point he made. And that's a fantastic point he made.
yes. Well, I think one of the many sad consequences of COVID is it basically brought to a halt the international exchange, study abroad, et cetera. But, my hope is that now that we're sort of coming through the COVID period, that universities are going to ramp up study abroad opportunities, faculty exchanges. We need university leadership that will develop partnership with universities like Raj's in India, so that faculty have the opportunity to spend time at another university. We've had some modest programs like that, but I think in this era of globalization, it would be in the interest of all universities to find these partnerships and have a regular and systematic means of faculty exchange, and to invest more in study abroad opportunities. All sorts of study abroad programs. Sometimes it's a year abroad, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
It could be during the summer,
Right.
or during the winter break to drive down the cost. But I think in this day and age, it's so important that as many of our students as possible have some international experience.
I agree.
Before they complete their study.
Can I just for a second, because I want to address this from the work that I do at AAC&U. So more of our progressive institutions, the students are actually advocating for some of their fees to go into a opportunity for other students. Like they're taking that and putting the student fees into a funding mechanism for students who may not have the opportunity to go abroad. But in our work at AAC&U, we look at global learning in a larger context, not just study abroad, but what are the actual outcomes of global learning, and how do we bring that into place-based opportunities, and in addition to study abroad opportunities for students to learn across the board. That's why I think the leveraging, like you said, of technology, but also the immersion experiences, it can be a holistic approach to doing this, because not everyone's going to get that opportunity because of the funding limitations. But how do we, if we think about social justice as corrective justice that we were talking about before, how do we correct the systems to actually support this work?
I have two questions. First, for Dr. McNair, you characterized my generation's lack of trust in our institutions as like that's the major issue, that we don't trust the institutions. But for example, European think tanks have stated that the United States is a backsliding democracy. So how does, and most of your solutions are just, let's go back to the institutions. When those institutions are failing, how is that a solution? Shouldn't we solve that issue first? And then the second question is, Mr. Kumar, you've been commenting a lot about positively over India's inspiration to the American system, but also India has, at least, let me not characterize all of India, but Narendra Modi is a neo-fascist, and he's a part of the rising fascism seen in Brazil with Bolsonaro, more recently with Giorgia Mussolini in Italy, Poland's law and justice system, etc. So we're seeing a systemic failure in institutions that I feel you guys are failing to address with your positions.
So let me address the question. Let me go back and clarify. So I was referencing the research from the group Next 100, who surveyed students within the more traditional age range of 18 to 21. And they came back and they said that the majority of those students didn't feel that the people who were in representative elected positions were representing their beliefs and their values. And they were not representing their trust in whether or not our democratic system could actually address their concerns. So that came from national research. Look it up, Next 100, that particular group that's doing that work. I am a strong believer. I actually do understand that our institutions have to transform and address our own inequities and how we're failing our students as part of being this democratic principles and ideals. That's what I believe, that we cannot do this work without institutional transformation with the focus on educating for democracy. It has to be a both and, because we are not representing the very democratic ideals and principles, especially when we have inequities in student outcomes that are perpetuating across the board, from graduation retention to learning to student success. How can we say we're beacons of democracy when we're not meeting those goals ourselves? So I am a complete supporter of institutional transformation and truth-telling and what we need to do in higher education to advance those democratic ideals.
I wanted Dr. Kumar to answer this question.
Sure. I'll answer
about
both
the
of them.
dictatorship and the democracy.
Absolutely.
Fascism, I think that's what he said.
I wasn't saying dictatorship. I was just saying the BJP party is a neo-fascist party. Hindu nationalism. You probably.
I'll respond to both. The first one also is important because I think it's very critical for us to recognize that in the evolution of all, at least democracies, democracy has provided opportunity for us to improve the quality of governance. The fact that people trust the ability of democracies to refine and reinvent and reimagine governance and people having a say in the future is the hope that has been possible for democracies to have free and fair elections on one hand and smooth transitions of power. So in some ways, while we might recognize the inadequacies of existing governance structures, we should also recognize that these governance structures have the ability to be improved and transformed and completely rewritten through the democratic process. And that's why we should invest in democracy. The problems of democracy cannot be solved by authoritarianism or other forms of it. The problems of democracy can only be solved by more democracy, be it in the country or in the institution. Responding to your second question, I think it's absolutely critical to recognize that democracies, elected democracies all over the world are facing a huge challenge, which is that to what extent elections alone can be a measure for determining popular mandate. In fact, one of the things that we need to recognize is that for a very long time, and this is also a very important American ideal, where a lot of American pre-existing thinking was to promote the idea of democracy. I mean, if you look at the Ford Foundation's effort for a very long time, and many other, literature, academic literature emerging out of this country was to promote the notion of democracy, and democracy alone can somehow solve the problem. But now we have come to a realization, albeit a bit late, that it's not enough. We need to work towards building civil society consciousness. We need to work towards building rule of law cultures. We need to work towards building diversity and inclusivity in communities so that the mere electoral process and smooth transitions of power are not adequate, and we need to build in deeper checks and balances within the power holders, so that we need to create institutions which can speak truth to power. You talked about governments acting in an authoritarian manner. This is a very genuine threat that democracies are facing, and the only antidote for that is to build greater and stronger civil society. And I, for one, believe that that stronger civil society is going to emerge through the youth of the world, but also through universities providing education that can help people to question the existing models and challenge status quo. Universities are those institutions where these ideas could be challenged, and that's how you can make governments accountable.
Thank you, Dr.
Could I just
Kumar.
add a word? Yeah.
By all means.
I'm so glad you raised your question. It was a very profound one. And let's be honest, our democracy is being challenged.
It's
It is
in
at risk
danger.
right now. And it should be a concern for all of us.
Yeah.
Our hope, my hope is that in the role of our universities is to provide a quality of education on social responsibility, and so that you're here at this university, you're learning about how to make change, about our society, about how to take collective action, about how you can make a change. So my hope for our country, quite frankly, is your generation. You've got to take advantage of this education you're getting at Montgomery College and get engaged in our society and help lead the kinds of changes we need to protect the precious democracy that is the ideal of this country.
Very well said.
This was an incredible experience for me. I came here with the intention, I'm a Senate member here at the Germantown campus with a goal specifically on the transition from, I guess you would say, like a homeless situation, which I was in, to actually be a student here at Montgomery College, which is great because, like you said, Montgomery College has the most resources that I have ever experienced in all of my educational career. The difference is, on a granular level, you guys are debating like obviously the global impact and how to, make it more easier to get. I guess my question is, from a granular perspective, there is a very big disconnect between people that are on the ground to actually getting to an education here at Maryland. That is very easily to access, even with need-based opportunities. And I'm working on trying to bridge that gap. And I guess my question to you is, what is a more responsible way to effectively talk to you guys about that transition?
Dr. Kirwan.
Well, I think I don't know, you have to start on your campus. I mean, that's where you are. You have contact, so there must be a campus. Is there a campus senate? Is there?
And I was actually.
That you're a representative of the Senate, and
yeah.
So I would, work through the Senate, bring issues, engage your administration, and so that they're well aware of the grassroots, as you say, feelings and concerns. And I think that through that kind of dialogue is, it to me has always been the most effective way to engage the administration.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
From what I understood, a core principle of social justice is the reduction or elimination of inequality. But is that not in direct opposition to our market-based economy?
All right, I can respond to that. I would, there's a shorter answer I'm going to give, but the longer answer, you should read a book. There's a book entitled "What Money Can't Buy: The Moral Limits of Markets," written by a Harvard-based moral philosopher, Michael Sandel. And Michael Sandel in that book talks about the idea, and precisely what you just asked, which is that he makes a distinction between a market economy and a market society. A market economy is one where everything that we do is measured in monetary terms. A market society is something different. And so in many ways, and the consequence of the market economy is institutionalized forms of corruption and inequalities. Both are the inevitable consequences which also affected, including education. So in some ways, what we need to recognize is that competition and many aspects of the role of markets is worthy, and there is a space for that, but we need to recognize some things money can't buy, and there ought to be moral limits on markets. Where those limits are is part of a discourse and debate that every society has to have, and part of the discourse that we're having today is part of that effort as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please join me again in thanking our donor and our panelists.
Thank you.
I'm really grateful for this time we've had. I'm so proud to be a member of Montgomery College, and we transform lives here. And everything that we've heard today is about transforming lives for social justice. I look forward to this work continuing when the new Center for Racial Healing, Truth at Racial Healing and Justice opens up next year. We're already starting the work, right? So thank you all very much for that.